It's right up to your,
I'll just hold it.
yeah,
Okay.
and just stop.
Okay. I guess I need the. We got some problem makers in the back. Okay, well, thank you all for coming this evening. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the diversity of ferns that we have here in San Diego County. Maybe a little natural history, a few stories on some of the species that we have, but also if you get the book, and I'm going to show you some pictures as well, some things that we all need to be looking for out there to actually increase the diversity of this group in our region. So with that, maybe it's working, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not on. There we go. Okay, this book wouldn't have been possible without Annette Winter. And she was one of our long-term volunteers at the museum. And she kind of pushed this entire project, basically. And kind of one of the reasons it started was last year, we just celebrated our 150th year of the museum. So as an organization. And there was a book that was written by Helen Witham in the 70s, and you may know that one, called The Ferns of San Diego. And we thought it's time to redo that book. And Helen, started the Canyoneers, and she did some amazing things with the museum. But we thought, we can probably, there's new things, there's a lot of changes in ferns. And so we thought we would do a new edition of that. And I wanted it out for our 150th year. I'm a year late, so to speak. But we did get it out this last year, the end of this last year. So this wouldn't have been possible without Annette's help on this project. To give you an idea of what we've known about the ferns in our county over the years, starting back at about 1911. And just so you know that like a lot of the early folks that were in San Diego that were like making plant collections and interested in plants, they kind of had that Victorian mindset of going out and working with nature, kind of like Darwin and the like, but they were really into ferns. And so our fern collection is quite amazing at the museum. In fact, we ended up giving away hundreds and hundreds of specimens of ferns from around the world. But we had a massive collection of ferns. And that was before I arrived at the museum. And it was because we wanted to get them to an institution that would actually study those ferns. Now we're kind of all digitized and we're getting all of our data out there that anybody around the world can actually see the stuff. But at that point, we wanted to do that. So we kind of lowered our collection of worldwide ferns and we kind of kept what we have in our region. So these are some of the people that started that work. And you can see that in our most recent edition, even from Helen's work in the 70s, we're now up to 49 different kinds of ferns. That's actually quite a bit of diversity in our region. And to put that in perspective of California, which California is like mega diverse in all ways. It is the most diverse state in the US by a long shot. But there are a lot of different ferns. We're in a big state. There's a lot of topographic diversity, a lot of just regular floristic diversity, et cetera. So if you compare some of the groups here, let's see if I can use the pointer. You can see that there are about, I can't even read it now, 122 different kinds of ferns in all of the state. But we have, well, about 50, almost half. That's pretty damn good in our county. I mean, I just was talking with the fern specialist at the CNPS conference, and she was like, you have like almost 2/3 of all the ferns. I'm like, well, maybe not quite that high, but we do have some pretty special ones, but there's some groups that are really significantly lower. If you look, so on regular ferns, and I'll explain all these as we go through the talk, well, we're okay, we've got half or whatever, but look at like Ophioglossan fern. There are 17 different ones in the state. We have 1. And then if you look at like Lycophytes, there are 18 and we have less than half. We have 7 of those. So there's a couple of groups where we just don't have enough water, basically what it comes down to. And they just didn't make it, or that we don't even have relictual populations in this area of the state. But we do have our diversity. And I should mention there's one other thing there that I didn't talk about. Why do I have a number in parenthesis afterwards? Because that is what we could have that I can think of. So this book includes 17 species that are either just north of our border of San Diego or just south of it in Baja California that really should likely be here in our county. And so I've incorporated them. They're in the book with full color plates and how to key them and all that kind of stuff, because you know what? There's just not enough botanists out there today. And so we need help. So if you're out with iNaturalist and now you have this book and you know what to look for, you can go on a quest. And I've even given you ideas like where you should go. So we'll talk about that later. But so that adds quite a few other species into the book. So what do the ferns look like in our area? Well, most people think that picture is actually from Alaska because I go up there every year. And you can see, well, that doesn't look like, oh, there's a lot of species there. And unfortunately, this like projector's kind of not the best. Sorry. But it is, there's a lot of fern diversity even in that one little area in Alaska. We don't see that often on our landscape in San Diego, but you can still find like, this is not very big here, but that's me. And this is like a fern grotto. And there's like, I don't know, at least 10 species of fern right there, including the giant chain fern, Woodwardia, which is actually taller than I am. So it's a really big fern that we have here. That's a native one in our area. And then we have those ferns that are not the biggest ones in the area that are pretty strange looking. Most people would say, that doesn't even look like a fern. So we have that kind of group here as well. But where can you find them? So let's go, those are the two questions I'm going to kind of answer first. Well, we have lots of ferns that this is what they look like. What you would typically say, that looks like a fern to me. And we have quite a diversity of those. And they may be there only for a short time because it may dry out, but they'll be green. Like right now, this is the time you should be out looking for ferns. It is amazing. We've got some rain tonight. They're going to look good for a little bit longer. So this is where you can actually go out and see those. As things start to dry out, you're not going to be able to find them again. And so they're going to just kind of shrivel up. They're there. They're just waiting for the next time when there's more rainfall. And then we have those ferns that don't really look like ferns. I mean, some of them look like four-leaf clovers up here. Some of the Marsilia, which floats on the surface, looks like a four-leaf clover. Some of them kind of look like Venus flytraps. I mean, they're some weird things that are in this fern group and that you wouldn't typically think of as being a fern, but they're all addressed in the book as well. So, and then the second question is, where would you find them? Pretty much anywhere in the county. Considering we're a pretty dry county compared to Northern California, you can still find ferns pretty much anywhere. And so this is just specimen records, I think, of fern taxa throughout our county. And that's just at our own thing. So there's some gaps there, but they're really pretty much throughout, except the low desert. Now, you get some rocky areas in the desert, and watch out, you might actually find some ferns there. We have some really arid adapted species of ferns, but the low desert, that's a little hard for them to grow. And we'll talk about why that is. So to understand about ferns and lycophytes, I know you're like really a phylogeny, you're gonna make me look at like evolution of ferns, but you have to understand this kind of stuff to understand why we looked at the book this way. So I'm going to start off just the lower part of the phylogeny, and you can say green algae, because we know basically plants evolved from that particular group. And then we got this group, which you'll be familiar with, which are the liverworts, the hornworts, and the mosses. Now, these are non-vascular groups, and that's the first one that I want to look at here. You would know these. We have all of these here in our county. How many of you have seen a hornwort in our county? There's not very many. It's not very often that you get to see it, but they are here. They're one of our rarer groups of the bryophyte groups, but they look kind of like this right here, and they have this kind of straight horn-like structure. These are the liverworts, and these are the mosses. And of those, one interesting thing that happens here, right after these peel off, these are non-vascular groups, but they have what this next thing that's going to happen in evolution is they have independent sporophytes. What does that mean? Well, in this case, when you see a moss, this is the gametophyte, this is a sporophyte. This is a gametophyte, that's a sporophyte. This is a gametophyte, that's a sporophyte. These are almost like parasitic. They actually live on the gametophyte. They can't live on their own. So they are not independent. They basically have to live on that gametophyte. So the next step we're going to say is totally different than that. We have something that's independent, and that's when we get to start the ferns and then higher plants after that. So the ferns have an interesting life cycle because they have what we call, well, basically all higher plants have this called alternation of generations. And you're like, oh my God, he's going to give us more botany lesson here. But it's important to understand what these ferns are because they're really quite amazing when you think about this. So what you think of a fern is right here, or most people do. And that is a sporophyte. So all the cells here are diploid, just like you and I. And then on the underside of the leaves, you'll sometimes see these little orange things. That's called a sorus, and that's a cluster of sporangia that are under there. So that's a thing that produces spores. And it's in that, it's in that structure that meiosis occurs. And so it's basically having the chromosomes at the end of that. So you get these spores that are half the chromosome of the plant. So think about where that happens in humans. It either happens in the testes or in the ovary. That's where meiosis goes on. Well, this happens in the sporangium for this particular group. And it's not so different to human reproduction in some ways. So these spores come and they go off into the environment and they germinate and they form this green photosynthetic free living structure that is very tiny and it's on the soil in most cases. And so that is an independent living gametophyte. So that all the cells that here are all haploid cells, no different than the sex cells that we would have, like sperm and eggs. And on that body, there's some structures called antheridium and archegonium, not important, but one produces eggs and one produces sperm. Yes, plants have sperm. In fact, ferns in particular have motile sperm. So they have to be able to swim in water. And that's why you find ferns basically in wet areas, because that sperm has to swim through a film of water. So this is swimming, and then it goes in here. And when it does that, they unite, and that's fertilization. And you're back to a diploid again, right? Just like an embryo is formed from a sperm and an egg, it's no different here. And so once that happens, you have this new fern that grows out of that, and then this withers and dies, and you go back to that. So it's an interesting thing. Two different generations, you just don't see one of them. So you only see basically the sporophyte. And you have to really look hard to find the really tiny ones. But they are beautiful. I just met a student recently at UABC in Ensenada, and he's actually taking spores, germinating them, and doing photography, and it looks like art. It is beautiful. I mean, these very thin cellular things, but they form these heart-like structures. Been perfect for Valentine's Day, I think. Okay, so let's move up the bit here on the thing. We have the next thing that happens is what's called xylem and phloem. That is vascular tissue. That's what moves the water and the nutrients around in the body of a plant. Before that, these didn't do that. That's why all your mosses and your liverworts are tiny. They don't have specialized structures for moving things through the body. They can't get big like a bigger plant is. So here you have all this vascular structure, just like our veins inside of our body, but in the plant in this case. And so now we have everything from here is a vascular plant from there. So you may have heard that term before. So that's the presence of xylem and phloem. Then the next lineage that comes off are the lycophytes. And this is the one I think is the most under-respected group out there. Like everybody knows, what the hell is a lycophyte? Why do you have a book on ferns and lycophytes? Well, you do know what many of them are, but you may not recognize the name. And so this group actually had its heyday long before the rest of the plants. And so these were dominant trees way back when, back to like the 420 million years ago. These were the things that were these massive forests that then became the coal deposits, basically, that we have today. And so that was dominating the earth at that time. And so you had all these lepidodendrales. We have multiple genera and that kind of thing. And that's what's created all that thing. So they had their heyday Now they are not very diverse in our area. So things have changed since their evolution. What we have left in the lycophytes are 3 families. And you might know some of these. We have 2 of them in San Diego County. We have the Selaginellaceae, which are the spike mosses. They're not a true moss, they're vascular. So they have vasculature, and that makes them different than the mosses. And that's why we always put a hyphen, by the way. If it says a spike moss and there's a hyphen, it's not a true moss, it's a spike moss. It's a kind of a fake one, but it looks like a moss. And then we don't have this group, the Lycopodiaceae, but if you go north in California or up to Alaska or anywhere, Canada, you'll see these. These are the club mosses. And they are a lot of different genera in this group, but we don't have them here in San Diego. And then the last one is a little more difficult to see in the field. It's the Isoetaceae, and those are the quillworts. And they look a little bit like a little onion, but they really look like a tiny tuft of grass, to be honest, in the field. So those are the 3 groups of lycophytes. Now, the most famous one, and so I came from the Midwest, and I remember this vividly when I was taking biology for the very first time. My teacher would take this plant out of his desk drawer at the beginning of class, and he'd pour a bunch of water on it. And it looked like this. And then by the end of class, it looked like this. It was green, it looked photosynthetic, it looked amazing. And we always call that a resurrection plant or a resurrection fern. And this is not really a fern by any means, it's a lycophyte, but this one is Selaginella lepidophylla, and it actually occurs naturally in Baja, in the southern part of southern, like Baja California Sur, the southern state. We don't have it here, but we have other members of that particular genus here. But did anybody else have that when they were growing up and had a resurrection plant? I mean, it was an amazing thing for me to see something just come alive during class like that. And it's kind of a cool looking, almost fossil looking thing in general, if you see it. So we have quite a few species in this particular group, but 2 that are, well, really common here along the coast is that we have Selaginella bigelovii, Bigelow's spike moss, and it looks like this, and you see those on rock outcrops and that kind of thing, and you're like, well, that looks like a moss, but it's actually not. It's a spike moss. It's another vascular plant. And there may be mosses all around it as well, that frequently grow with it. And then this one over here is a higher elevation species right in the desert transition, kind of high desert. This is a rarer species. It's a CNPS listed species called Selaginella eremophila. And you can find that, but there's a whole lot of other things. They do have specialized cone-like structures. This is called a strobilus, so it's like a cone, and they have reproductive parts on them as well. So that's how they're reproducing in the field. So, and then some other ones you might find. We have one that's really rare, and this is where I need your help. So it's in the book because it's hard to recognize in the field if you don't know what you're looking for. And it is a listed species as well. We know it from a few, I'm sorry, this screen is so tiny, you can barely see it, but these are the locations of it in our county. It's a higher elevation species in general. It's called Selaginella asprella. And the bluish spike moss, it has kind of a low growing habit, but it often will have these little strobili on it as well. We need more of that. I guarantee we have more populations in our county, but you have to not just think, oh, well, that's a typical little, another Selaginella. You need to take a good photo of it and do a close-up, and we might find some new populations. But right now, looks like we only have 4 dots on the map. So that would be something that, and it is coming in through iNaturalist. People are finding it on iNat as well, but this will give you an idea of what to look for in our region. Then we have Isoetes, and we have a few different species of these. And these are really hard to see in the field. As you can see, it looks like basically a little tuft of grass. And you're like, you could pull up grass all day long and never see an Isoetes. But if you get a feel, they kind of have a wiry look to their leaves, and you can actually see it in the field. But they have these little expanded bases on them, make them look like a little onion bulb almost. And those are the reproductive parts. They have different types of sporangia in there. And getting good pictures, the 2 species are really different. You can't really see that, but this one's bumpy. There's only a couple of occurrences. This one's much more widespread. This is Isoetes orcutii, or Orcutt's quillwort. And that was named after Charles Orcutt, actually one of the early collectors that was here in San Diego. and did a lot of collections here in the late 1800s. Okay, so let's move up the list a little bit because you're like, well, why aren't you talking to me about fern allies? Because I remember them that way, ferns and fern allies. And one of those fern allies was always equisetum, the horsetails of the scouring wort, and so, or scouring rushes. And those are no longer considered fern allies. They are ferns. So they are within the phylogeny of that. You can see they fall right here. Everything through here are ferns. And you can see it's just an early arm of that. And so we don't consider them an ally. They're actually part of the fern group. And there are quite a few of them. They're usually called horsetails or scouring rushes. Scouring rushes if they don't have the lateral branches, horsetails if they do. And the reason they're called scouring rushes is that basically they have silica in there, and some of these in particular were used to like scrub pots, and you can actually scrub them, the silica in there. They're really good for cleaning things. In fact, I remember using them in the field and at times camping to trying to get some of the grit of your dirty food out of a pan. But they're very common in some areas. There are only 15 species worldwide. We still have one really large one. It is not in our area. This is Equisetum giganteum, but this is a one that's in Central America and into South America as well. But they had their heyday as well back in the Carboniferous. They were also dominant, big tree-like things that dominated the landscape. Now they're just not so much. They require a lot more water. And we have quite a few species of them. In fact, we have most of the species in California except for one. And the most common one that we do have is this smooth scouring rush, Equisetum levigatum. We have some that are these horsetail types. So this is a scouring rush, that's a horsetail. This one actually goes all the way up to Alaska. I mean, it's a really widespread group. And then we have even some naturally occurring interspecific hybrids that live on their own. They reproduce on their own vegetatively. And this is a hybrid between this species and another species called Equisetum hyemale. And so, but it is on its own, you can find it out, and it's actually one of the more common ones you find oftentimes. So once a hybrid forms, if it can be asexual, it'll stay that way, and they can spread that way as well. And then now let's get on to the ferns. And so the rest of the ferns that we think of as ferns. And I've put this little thing in here. I won't go into detail on it, but there's a few structures. When you do use a key, you have to understand some basic terminology on ferns. And so one of those is, we call this a frond, basically, and the frond is made up of all these blade parts. The young ones, as they come up, are called fiddleheads sometimes, or croziers is another common name for them. Oftentimes these are eaten in various groups, and you can eat of certain species, you can eat those young ones. These are called pinna, or a pinna, like here, and multiple would be pinnae. And then the structures underneath are the sori. And then there's an indusium, which is like a covering that goes over the top of the sporangia that are hidden underneath. So you might have something over the top of the sorus that is there. And so we have some really interesting common ferns in our area. Someone was mentioning this tonight. I can't remember who it was, where they said, oh, I just learned about California polypody. And here it is. It's a really common species. Sometimes it's upright, sometimes it's hanging. It's really quite variable in our county. It's also all over the western side of our county. It's a really, really common species. It has nothing. It has no indusium. You just see all the sporangia. They're in a sora. They're in a group like that, a sorus, but there's no covering that protects all those things underneath. And then we have over here, this is Dryopteris arguta, another very common thing. This is the coastal wood fern. You can see it all over. These you can take a hike in most canyons. If it's a big enough canyon, you'll find both of these species at this time of year. And then we have some that we're always on the lookout for. So here's one of those that could be at higher elevation. This is in Baja, and it's north of us, and that's called Polypodium hesperium, the western polypody. It's a little bit smaller and usually hides in those high elevation cracks of things. I really expect it up on Cuyamaca, Hot Springs, our high Sky Island habitats. You might be able to find this species. So that's one of those things. Get out there and look for that. Go on a quest and see if you can find this thing. Other ones, we have a lot of high elevation species because they usually do like a lot of water. This is Polystichum. It's a big showy fern. You see it up in Palomar and Cuyamacas and Lagunas, et cetera. You can see it spread here at high elevation. Really a pretty good sized dramatic fern. Over here, we have little tiny bladder ferns. These are really fragile in general. You try to pick a leaf and it always falls off. It's actually called Cystopteris fragilis for a reason, that the blades fall off quickly. And you find that up high elevation. And then this one we found, in fact, Mike, I think, is here, but we found this in the collection up on Cuyamaca Peak. This is only place that we've ever found it. And I found it again this last year I was up there. And this is Myriopteris intertexta, and you can see it's only on the peak that we're aware of. But it should be other places. It could actually be on the tops of any of our sky islands, but you have to know what to look for and how it's different than the rest of them. And I've tried to make that easy with the book by having plates that show the key characters on how to separate one from the next. Am I blocking you? Are you okay? Okay. And then here's another couple. This is another common species here in the coastal areas. This is the California lace fern. It's really a pretty species. But another one, this one, which is called the dense lace fern, was only known from one collection. And they're the same genus. They're two different species. But what's interesting about that, it was found in 1987 in our county by Geraldine Hirschberg. If you know Geraldine, worked a lot at high elevation. But it is majorly disjunct. Look at it. It's here on Cuyamaca Peak, and this is the rest of the population. I mean, that's a long way. It's not in the transverse range. It's not on San Jacinto Peak. It hasn't been found anywhere, but it's on Cuyamaca Peak. So when we went to look for it, we thought, well, maybe it'll be on the highest. It's not on the highest areas. It's actually lower on Cuyamaca Peak, kind of toward North Peak. And we thought, well, it had been collected once. Maybe we should still see if it's here. And so in 22, we went looking. We had a group of us. It was after the Cedar Fire, as you know, because that was 2003. It's still horrible up there to try and hike around off trail, because it is just full of ceanothus and this stuff. In fact, it's so dense. We had some young guy that was in front of us that was working for state parks, and he had to like go and then jump backwards and like make us path. We were ripped, we shredded our clothes. We were all bloody. It was horrible, but we found it. I guess that's what's important, right? We found it. But I'm sure there's other populations, but you're gonna have to look for them on your own. You might have to expect a little blood in the process as well. Here's a fern that we're a little worried about. And this is a beautiful one. It's a spleenwort. This is the only spleenwort that we have at this point in our county. This is the western spleenwort, Splenium vespertinum. And you can see its populations here. There was one up here as well. In fact, I didn't show this, but it goes into the transverse range and over. All of those are gone. They haven't been found on INAT, nothing recently. In our county, I thought, well, it's pretty widespread. And then Margie Mulligan and I were looking at this at one point, and we're like, all these are the specimens. The INATs are really here. In fact, we haven't been able to find it through most of its range. And we don't know if it's like a drying thing. Is it a wildfire thing? Is it a weedy thing? It has a really specific microclimate, but we had a lot of historical collections of it. And now you rarely ever see this. You really have to look hard to find this one in the field. So we're worried about the future of that. In fact, it's now listed, and because we're CNPS listed, because we're worried about what may be happening to this. And then there's another species of spleenwort, which looks like basically a big thing of grass that is north of us and south of us, and it's called Septentrionale, the northern spleenwort. And it really, this is found on San Jacinto. I think that's Tom Chester's photo, actually, or somebody there was working with him. And it could very likely be on our Sky Islands as well, because it is south of us in Baja as well. So the museum, we have a long history of ferns. In fact, you know, one of our founders back 150 some years ago now was Daniel Cleveland. And all those things that you can think of that are Cleveland that, Salvia clevelandii, Myriopteris clevelandii, like this one here, they're all named after him. Not Grover. That's the national forest, is Cleveland National Forest. That's a totally different Cleveland. This was a local lawyer that was here and 150 some years ago, and he was one of the co-founders of the museum. In fact, his collections became the first set of museum specimens, and now we're up to like over 9 million scientific specimens, not in the herbarium, but and through all of the disciplines that we have there. So, and we have his collections and we still use them today, and those are from 1874. And so we still use them like they were collected yesterday, but he founded our whole museum, started our herbarium, and he had about 3,000 specimens to do that. So I'm glad there's a lot of things named after him. But even though he was just a hobby, he was a hobbyist, he's an enthusiast. That doesn't matter. Anybody can serve science and do amazing things. You don't have to have a PhD or a master's in things. I mean, every one of you can contribute to this. You can all go looking for these ferns and you contribute to science in that way. So in fact, I wanted to talk about this. We have some desert ferns as well. So thinking about living in a desert, and you can only reproduce when there's enough moisture around, you got to be kind of in a wettish area, like a wet side of a rock or a deep canyon or that kind of thing. This is the very common one, Myriopteris perryi. This is Perryi's cloak fern, and this is Myriopteris viscida. We have both of those that are in kind of desert to desert transition. This one we haven't found. It is north and south of us as well. It's a genus Astrolepis. Beautiful thing. I wish we had that in our county, but it hasn't been found quite yet. But we have some other interesting desert ferns that also occur at the coast. And this is Nothelina californica. You see it very commonly over in the desert, but you see there's some these are historic collections. I don't think anybody has eye-natted it over here yet. And I don't know why that is exactly. It could be wildfire changes. It could be all kinds of things as well, climate change, et cetera. But we have historic collections of it here in the southwestern part of our county. Now, the question is, how in the heck did it go from the desert over here? So, and I will tell you, this is not the only example of that. There actually are quite a few species that run along the coast here and into the southwestern part of our county that are desert species. And it's an interesting biogeographical trend that we've found in doing the plant atlas and other things like that. But how did they get here? Well, I will tell you, my hypothesis is they actually came through San Matias Pass in Baja California. They did not go up and over our mountains. That is just not even possible. And so, but there's a whole bunch of things that come up through the pass between the Sierra Juarez and Martyr, and they come almost to the coast. Oh, crap. They come almost to the coast. And that is, I'm pretty sure that's how they got into our area. Or they came up all the way from the desert in Baja California and along the very arid parts of the immediate the coastal Pacific area. But that's basically where they occur in our region. So that's one of those. Please find that and see if it still exists here in the southwestern part of our county. Now, I was just out over the weekend, and let me see, did I have one before that? No. I was out over the weekend in Anza Borrego, and on the way back, I said, I want to go look for an interspecific hybrid of ferns that occurs in Centenac Canyon. It's a species, it's a hybrid species that is between Myriopteris perryi, desert fern, and Myriopteris covillii, which is a little bit of higher elevation fern. But they all come together right at Centenac Canyon. So you get like junipers and other things growing with desert things there. And so I thought, it has been only collected 3 times in history. The type in 1881 county, that's from San Bernardino. And then another one in 1921, which is from Riverside County near Palm Springs. And then there was one collection, I have to tell you, it is the crappiest collection I have ever seen in my life. It is like this big. It's a part of a frond. And it is not at our institution, it's at Cal Academy. And it was collected in 1964, and that was from the Centenac area in 1964. So that's the most recent collection of this. Well, I was out with a couple of volunteers, and sure enough, we got lucky on our day on the way back, and we found it, and there it is. That's an interspecific herd called Parrish's lip fern, and that is that interspecific hybrid. You can see there is covillii, is perryi, and there is that little parrishii. It's a cute little thing when you see it in the field. But let's don't stop there. because there's another one that should be in our county. And it's another interspecific hybrid that is between Covillii and Newberrii. And this is where I think it's going to occur. And it's never been documented from our county. But if you're ever in this part and you're like, well, how could I tell from this? On the Plant Atlas website, you can map out all this stuff. So you can just sit at your computer and press, I'd like that, and it'll map it together. And you can see where the overlap is between those. And if you happen to know a good place to go hiking there, go out and see if you can find it. It'll be up right now for the next, well, depending on what happens with the rain, right? So maybe another month, these things will be available. It'd be wonderful to find this interspecific hybrid in our county as well. So just kind of increases our knowledge of ferns, what's happening with them in the area, et cetera. Now, another one you might know are silverback and goldback ferns, and these are very common in San Diego. In fact, we're the center of diversity for pentagramma. There is no other place you're going to find as many pentagrammas as San Diego County. And so we call them silverbacks when they have that whitish silvery look, and the ones that are yellow, we call them goldbacks. And there's Helen Witham always told a story in her books. I don't know if you remember this, but a lot of times the girls would wear black hosiery. And so they would go out and find these things, and then they would impress them on there to make fancy designs on the black hosiery. And so you'd have these fern-like things all over the black hose. And so this species, there's a couple of them here, but this one is very, very common. Look at its distribution. It has not been found outside of our county, except for to the south into Baja. But it has not been found. We got it on Camp Pendleton. It has not been found in Orange County yet. And it's our most recently described species. It was only described a few years ago. We kept calling it Maxonii for many years, but this is Pentagramma glandulovicida. And it is one of the more common species you'd find out there now. This is Pentagramma triangularis right here. It has the yellow back. This is the best fern ever. Pentagramma rebmanii. That was named by Annette, and I did not name it. This is named by Annette and Mike. Mike, you're here, right, still? Yeah, he's over here. So, and Mike and Annette actually named that for me, which I really appreciate. Thank you. And then we have this one as well, which is Pentagramma viscosa. And we may have found this Maxonii thing over in the desert transition, but I think we're not actually done there. As you actually get into ferns, I have some text in there to say we may have some other things. Now, some of the ferns, like I said, don't look like just regular ferns. And so we have these things that pop up in wet areas like vernal pools that are ephemeral ponds, et cetera. And these are the hairy clover fern. This is Marsilia vestida. And to do those, you really need to take some pictures of this part. So you kind of have to dig them up a little bit. We might have, we've only found one species, but it's not impossible that another species might actually be in the area. But I didn't put any other in here because we have not found many in the vicinity. But these are the sporocarps. And this is the way that they rest in that area. You think about a vernal pool, it's really wet for a short time, right? Right now, as it fills up with water. The rest of the time, it is just hard clay like freaking concrete. How does a fern survive that? They survive inside of this structure. And there's been some studies that these things can last, like, they have some things like almost 100 years in Australia, not our species, but they've studied some in other places around the world, because it's actually a widespread group, that they can sit and wait for that long of a time. So actually then they come out and do their reproductive things, and then you'll see this part again. Another one that is related to that is Pilulera americana. This is the pillwort. It looks like a bunch of grass in a row, basically, but it also has little tiny sporocarps on it, like this. They're little round ones like that when you see it, but it just grows along, especially vernal pools. It loves vernal pools. And so you can find this one in some of the areas too. So you can see the distribution there. They're pretty much coastal. Of the coffee fern, we actually have two. Now, one of these is not recognized in the Jepsonii flora. I have no idea why. It is really distinctively different. morphologically in multiple ways, and then it's biogeographically throughout the immediate coast in our county. It's on the Channel Islands, and then it goes into Baja California as well. So these are coffee ferns, Palea andromedifolia. This is Var andromedifolia. You can see it has all these divisions in the leaf. And then this one does not divide that much. And this is Var pubescens. That's one way you can tell it. The other one is Var pubescens means it's hairy. And it has a hairy rachis right here. You can see the hairs up and down on the upper part of that. So this one only going to find at the immediate coast. But it is definitely something that we recognize because you can really separate it out well from the other ones. And it doesn't seem to be like something that's just a coastal effect. And then we have some really strange ones. So this is one of my favorite ferns in this area. It's hard to find these days, but this is the California adder's tongue fern, and named that because it kind of looks like a snake's tongue. And that is the reproductive, that's called a sporophore. And this is the vegetative part of it. It might just look like that and not actually produce the reproductive structure, but it's really pretty widespread, but it's losing ground because it has to compete with all of the non-natives that are in our coastal areas here. Now, it's also very strange because the gametophyte, remember I talk about the prothallis, that free living thing that lives on its own? It is not green and photosynthetic in this case. It actually lives underground and it feeds on mycorrhizae. And so that is pretty strange in itself, that it never comes above the surface and then outgrows this thing from that structure. So it's a very strange type of generation for it. Other common ones that we have here is the Myriopteris newberrii. And I just wanted to put in why iNaturalist and the things that I met some really good iNaturalist observers here tonight. And why is that important to us? And why do I spend my time being an addiction, basically, of IDing and verifying all of these observations? It's because it gives us a lot of information about these species. So here's this was pretty good. This is newberrii, and there are 117 specimens of it. But adding in just a few years of iNaturalist, and we got like 500. That means that changes our knowledge significantly of its distribution. Now, I will tell you, in this situation, the plant atlas was a little bit better. These are the specimen, the original plant atlas where we collected specimens. Spatially, it's actually a little bit better. But over time, this actually gets swamped out because of the numbers of observations that are coming in. So the reason I'm in there doing IDs, and that is on iNaturalist, is that basically, once I identify that, we pull the data into our databases so that we can map them out with the specimens. So we get more information from that. And to give you an idea, over the 150 years of collecting in San Diego County, we have about 117,000 specimens, which is pretty damn good, I will tell you. The original plant atlas brought in 73,000 new specimens. And then, but in just a few years, observers in Plant Atlas, you guys are freaking crazy. And there have been 1.4 million observations of plants in our county. And so, yes, I try to keep up with that. I'm over 1 million IDs now, but I can't keep up with that because I'm doing also Baja and Imperial County. So I'm trying to do a little bit too much. But thank you for your participation because it really changes our knowledge. And what we can then map with and the way we understand the species is that much more improved. So instead of having 117,000 dots, we now have over 600,000 dots of plants in our county. And what have iNaturalists done for us? All kinds of things, new records, new species, lost species, refound, all kinds of stuff. In fact, I don't know if anyone is in here, but the Southern California botanists wanted us to do something where we added all the new, like publish a paper on a bunch of new records from San Diego County. I don't normally do that because I don't have time to do that, but we picked 24 new records. A lot of them came in through iNaturalist. And those people, not only did they observe it, but then I said, hey, you got a new record. Can you get us a specimen? Do you need help with permitting? We can help with that kind of stuff. They went out again and they got a specimen and they brought it to the museum because iNaturalist is wonderful, but it's still an observation. It's something for us to verify, but it is not something for long-term documentation. And so they bring a specimen in, and we thought, you know, they have contributed to science. Let's make them authors of this paper. And so we put every one of them as an author of this paper. And I think the people that contribute, that is science. It is building information. And we can use the community because guess what? There's not enough damn botanists out there to do the work that needs to be done. We're constantly fighting, trying to understand what we have left, where it is, how much is it changing. We need your help to be able to do that. And INAT is a good platform for doing that. And so sometimes they rediscover things that we had no idea were still here. So here's a lomatium from Mission Trails, actually. It was done by Brennan Mulverney, who's an ornithologist who was out actually probably doing a contract work or something. He took a picture of something. He had it mis-ID'd. That's okay. We have documentation. He did great photography of it. Came along, we changed it and found, wow, that hadn't been seen in our county since 1937. So you never know what you're going to take a picture of. Even though you think, oh, that's some common thing, take a picture of it. Even more importantly, these are what happens. We are dealing with a weed epidemic in San Diego. So we are the most diverse county in the US. A lot of diversity, almost 3,000 species in our county. 934 of those shouldn't be here. They are non-natives that have naturalized, and they are competing with what we have left of our native habitats. 900. So I always put this in perspective with like Phil Unit. I don't know if you know, he's retiring this week and he's giving talks and that kind of stuff. This is the most diverse place for birds by a long shot, over 500 species. We have 900 weeds alone. I mean, that is just crazy that we have that kind of diversity. But how could we stop them? If we could detect them early, especially the bad invaders, that we have a chance to actually stop them from spreading. And here's two examples of that. This is Stipa or Stipulella capensis. The Cape ricegrass is taken over all over by Palm Springs. Couple of years ago, there was a group, it was Fred and Carla, who are major INAT observers over in the desert. They're walking, remember, this time of year, everybody wants to go see the desert wildflowers, right? And they don't do biosecurity. They don't clean their shoes, and they bring all kinds of stuff with them. And they're walking down Borrego Palm Canyon. Sometimes things jump off, and this was along that trail. And they found it, and the shocking part is a bunch of us got on that night and we're IDing, and we're like, oh my God, this is something brand new. You know, first we had to figure out what it was. This is a horrible invasive. The next day, there was a group of volunteers out there bagging every single one. The next day, and now they know, oh, it's a possibility. In fact, I think they just found another little population in a different area. They go back out and they clean it up. So that's one of those. And then this other species, Urospermum, is another one that was found like that. Early detection, rapid response, and we can continue to do that. INAT is amazing in that because that's one of the reasons I'm on there as well. To like, this is something new. We need to deal with it if it's a non-native, especially an invader. So the last thing, and this is just that same push of why I talked about INAT, is that you can use that phone in your pocket, and you can go on a quest using this book and go find some of these ferns that I think are here, 17 of them, that I think might actually be part of our native diversity, and find these things out and about in our natural areas somewhere. And so you don't need a PhD in studying ferns. You need to observe in a good way and make good observations and have fun in the field. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And sometimes they're not the native ones as well. Sometimes they're the non-native ones. Here's Silotum nudum, which we see all over coming up in your gardens and things like that. We have not found it actually naturalizing in a natural area outside of irrigation yet. But I guarantee it's there somewhere. It's got to be in some of these fragments in the bottom of our canyons, that kind of stuff. So take a picture of it the next time if you see something like that. Or this I took a picture on while I was biking around along the San Diego River right there near OB. And this is a non-native tree fern that is established there. It wasn't planted, I'm pretty sure, because it just came up in all this riprap stuff. But is that going to spread? Are we going to find more of it? That kind of stuff. So documenting those if they become a problem. Here's another non-one. You probably see this holly fern. Guess what? It doesn't stay at your house. It loves to actually spread. We have quite a few collections of it all the way into our natural areas. It really, these spores can blow in the wind. They can come up in a wet area all over. And even the sword ferns can do that. So those are some things to look for and to help us document. And with that, I will be happy to take some questions. So thank you for your attention. Yes.
When the desert firms that have come to the coast,
Mhm.
but it also has tracked it.
So the question is, on the desert ferns that are here at the coast, could they have been tracked in by the Kumeyaay? It's not impossible by any means. And if that was the only thing that I saw there, that'd be fine. But we actually have a whole lot of desert species that occur in the southwest part of our county. I mean, I think there's probably, I don't know, probably at least 30 species that we don't typically think of. They're not coastal California, but they're in that part of our county. So I think they're things, and they're common south of the border, a little bit more common south of the border. It gets drier as you go down a little bit. And I think they've just come up into that part of our county. So I think that it's not impossible, but I'm pretty sure that they basically did it that way. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But you can actually follow that species up the little San Matias Pass, and it curves up kind of towards the coast, almost to Ensenada. And so it wouldn't take but a hot, dry period to have those desert things actually penetrate into the coast. And then at the coast, it's pretty damn dry most of the year, so they can actually survive there. Yeah.
You're saying, John, that all those like amphimontane species, like Lycium and stuff like that, are coming up that San Matias?
Not all of those would be that way, but yes, Lycium would be one of those. If we understood the taxonomy of that group better, it'd be much better. But yes, we have Andersonii, we have Fremontii, we have these things at the coast, which are definitely there. Some of those might have been transported as well, because those are nice edible fruits, and they're definitely used throughout the region. I mean, I eat them in the field as well. So like they're very common in Mexico. So that could have been transported as well, but they might have come up as well. They're so common south of the border as well. There's various that could have come there too. Yeah.
Fabulous presentation as usual. To her point about San Matias Pass versus coming kind of up skirting the floristic province from the desert, is there evidence to suggest San Matias was the more likely route? Because it seems logical that as things just kind of shifted up, it would have kind of just flown, been drawn up along the coast to
Correct.
coastal areas.
That there is no evidence other in any way, because nobody has done phylogenomics on it yet, but we need there, or phylogeography, sorry.
Yeah.
We really need that on some of these species. And that fern species would be an amazing thing. Where's its closest things? Is it down through that area, or is it to the south? I think there's no question that some species actually did come up from like El Rosario area. I would say most probably did not. I think they cut across there. And if you follow now with INAT getting better in like Ojos Negros in that area, it's shocking the desert things that are there. I mean, you go to Valle de las Palmas, think about that.
Yeah.
That is, why is it called Valle de las? Those weren't brought in.
Right.
There's a lot of other desert species right there outside of Tijuana, basically. And so that's not, that's up that same channel. So I don't think it would take much to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
We're talking about, I find that natural is always plants that are nearby or similar, but then you go down the list and you might actually find something that is a better match, but it just goes far away. Is there a way to, does iNaturalist try to balance the closeness of the match and then uprank those ones that are uncommon if it's a much better match?
So does everybody understand that? So when iNaturalist gives you, and when you ask it to give it an ID, it'll ID for you, right? So especially at phone service. So it'll actually try to put an ID and recommend something for you. And that's fine. If you don't have a clue what it is, take the accept. That's why I'm on there. But it tries to find basically things in the closest vicinity that might be there. But remember, I've been trying to train INAT for 1 million times now already with all those IDs. I think it's getting well trained to our flora as a result of all of us that are on there doing those identifications. So we train that thing. And so it's getting better and better. We can definitely have disjunct things from other areas, but that's also why, that's what's exciting for me. And that's what keeps me up at night. And I'm actually sitting on there doing my little IDs because I think, oh, there could be this or this could be that, type of thing. So it's going to give you the most logical answer on that. And it may or may not be correct. And so don't take it that it's always going to be right. It is definitely not right. And everyone makes mistakes, including myself. So it is just that happens, but it's my way of quality controlling, basically. And it's getting better all the time. You notice the change if you've been on it for a while. It's getting better and better at the recommendations that it has. Yeah. Any other questions?
Those little vernal pool ferns are very cute. Are any of them in commerce or available for nurseries or anything? Or are they really specifically, they only like to grow in vernal pools and you can't have them by a pond or
I'm
anything?
sure somebody, I would think Marsilia has got to be in, you can probably buy Marsilia, I would think. That's a pretty common one. And definitely, I mean, actually some of our non-native ones that float on water can be a problem in different areas. But the vernal pool ones like Pilularia, no, things like that, no. Ophioglossum, I mean, I don't know how you'd even do that. You'd have to have the mycorrhizae in there for them to actually persist. So that would be really tough to do. That's why we save the areas that we have. What's left, we should be fighting tooth and nail to try and save that stuff because we won't be able to grow all that stuff eventually. So protect what we have is what that comes down to. But no, I haven't seen but Marsilia probably.
Can you save the spores? I mean, are you actually making?
I'm not doing that. That can definitely happen. Absolutely. That would be another group. It's like seed banking, right? You can spore bank as well. And I think there are groups that do that. I don't know of anyone doing that in our area. But spores, many of them will last for a long period of time. But just as we have this huge diversity of ferns and things out here and lycophytes, every one of those is going to be different in how to preserve them, how long can they be preserved for, that kind of thing. So that has to be found out for every single species that's out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm just more curious about possible effects or impacts like climate change, development in the backcountry and areas where some of these species are sought out, and also from a binational perspective. I know that the museum has quite a number of years and programs that are in place to working with Mexico. And how is that going? And is anything impacted in any way?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I'll take a couple of those. Those are two big questions. Let me talk about the first one, climate change. Yes, it's happening. I mean, I'm sorry, it is. You can deny it all you want, but it's happening. We see it day and night on most things. We don't understand how that's going to actually impact all these species yet, especially in species what we've done. I mean, now I'm working all this time in these urban canyons. What's going to happen with these fragments? They can't just jump over the bunch of houses to a new area. Some of them might be able to, others may not. And so climate change is going to impact these, but I will tell you that what I say is our number one problem for native plants now is not climate change. It's there. That's a continuous thing. We have no way, well, we have ways to help with that, absolutely. Maybe not currently, but there are definitely ways that we can actually improve that situation. But the number one problem I would say to native plants in San Diego County is no longer even development. We've actually developed a lot of our lands. We're still fighting to protect those lands. It is non-natives. Non-natives are overtaking our whole damn county. And so some of the are horrific what they are doing. I mean, it's shocking if you go for a hike in one of our canyons or one of our natural mission trails, a bigger area, and then go into like Baja California, a little further down where they don't have as many impacts of weeds. They're getting them, they're moving down, but it is like night and day when you see some of those things. And unfortunately, they're here and we're going to have to deal with it. And so either that or we're not going to have natives left any longer in many of these fragments, or only a few that can compete with those things. So that's my thing. That's our main problem right now, is what I would say, is non-native competition with the native species. The second question for Baja California, is that, yes, I mean, you know, I'm really a Baja California specialist at heart. I love Baja, and that's always been my true passion. I've fallen in love with San Diego too, and even Imperial County a little bit. But Baja California is an amazing place. And yes, I mean, I have students down there. I have graduate students, a master's and PhD right now in the Cape region. All of the museum folks, I can tell you, we consider ourselves a binational institution. And so we're constantly trying to protect the lands that are there, build resources, build capacity with more scientists in Mexico as well. So we do joint papers all the time. We're constantly going. So we're trying to do our part, you know, as that. But we all have got to help that, especially in the Northwestern area. We're connected, just so you know. That's just a stupid political boundary. It is not a biological boundary whatsoever. These species are just south of the border as well. Almost everything, 99% of our diversity is just south of the border as well. And so we need, if we're concerned about climate change and things in the future, we got to also, that's part of our area. And we need to do our best to help protect that as well. Yeah.
With regards to the invasive, or like what are your biggest recommendations, both for citizens and then also like from more government?
Go weed. No, that's a serious issue. And like we're now, I can tell you, it's been eye-opening for me to work in these. We have this big thing called the Healthy Canyons Initiative, where we're doing multidisciplinary work in 20-some canyons of San Diego, or kind of the metro area. And it's eye-opening what's there. And it's scary what is there. And I'm not giving this talk right now, but it's also native plants from California that shouldn't be there is another problem. I mean, we have all the non-natives that you think, oh, Australian, African, they're all Mediterranean, they're all escaping there too. But people that are including, I'm sure many members of CNPS would want to grow those native plants. They're growing things from like the Channel Islands and things that are not native here, and they're going right down and naturalizing. So they're impacting that as well. Now, that's not our biggest problem by any means. The biggest problem is what you can do, join a Friends of a Canyon or something like that. We're trying to map these things out, and the city doesn't have that much money. Let's be honest, they're pretty damn broke at the moment. And so, I mean, they really are struggling. And so we map these things like this invasive and this invasive, but when are they going to get the chance to actually remove that thing? And I think, you know, by the time they do that, is that going to be 50 years? Is it going to be 10 years? People are doing it. There's people out there, but I think every one of us could help out a little bit. If you've got the time, that's a great thing to do. You guys just did it, right? You removed a bunch of trash and things from an amazing site that's now really flourishing. And so if that could be done in a lot of other areas, that'd be wonderful. Yeah. So weeding is the kill those damn weeds. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
Dr.
yeah.
Raymond.
Yeah.
So quick question. So you talk about the non-locally native plants created certain pressure on the locally natives at the CNPS conference. So could you please expand your thoughts on that?
The non-native
Natives, because
yes.
all of
Yeah,
them
yeah.
come from California forested province,
yes.
right?
No, not all of them.
Oh,
I'll give you some examples. We have some people studying right now here in San Diego. So one of the things that got me a little upset is the dang Catalina Island cherry. So it grows extremely well in our area. It has big fruits. A lot of things like to eat it and disperse it as well. It only occurs on the Channel Islands. But it's been brought over here. We plant it along roads, we plant it in yards, and it goes straight down. That's called Prunus ilicifolia variety used to be called variety Lyoni. Now it's occidentale, by the way. But we have a native variety here. So we have Prunus ilicifolia here. So the variety ilicifolia. Unfortunately, it likes to hybridize with that as well. And so it's causing genetic issues in our canyons, and who knows how far that's going to spread into our natural areas. And a better example of that with hybridization is the brittle bush that's native to our area, but you don't find it naturally over here. You find it in the desert. It's beautiful. It's actually in full flower right now if you go over there. But it's a desert species. On this side, we have another type of brittle bush, and that's Encilia californica. Unfortunately, they do not have good reproductive barriers. So people are planting it, Caltrans is planting it. We get hybrid disasters occurring in the urban area, the fragments what we have left. So, and it's hard to find pure californica. In fact, I'm seeing stuff now in the trade that is hybrids as well. And so that either they thought was Farinosa or they thought was californica. And so it's going to cause problems, and we don't know what the long-term effects of that are. And I'm not saying that's all bad. I don't know, but we've created it. We've done it. And that it would never touch naturally in our area. They completely have a mountain that separates them, or a few mountains, actually. So those are the things we need to worry about of those. If you just get like a few of the Channel Island buckwheats escape, we can go out and remove them from the canyons. But if they start hybridizing with something else, then we get a mess. And we don't know what the impacts of that are going to be, is what it comes down to. Yeah.
This is kind of embarrassingly plant nerdy question, but.
That's why we're here, right? Okay.
Contain just one single ophiogloss,
Mhm.
about 4 years old. And I've noticed it's been spreading within that pot. I do nothing, it just sits outside.
Mhm.
And so you didn't really touch on asexual reproduction, but I'm wondering if that's actually going through the sexual reproduction process and providing this underground foraging on
Whatever, mycorrhizae.
or it's just asexually reproducing.
I can't tell you with that one. There are many ferns that use asexual. In fact, most of the arid adapted ones, they actually are really damn good because they can't reproduce sexually a lot of the time. Many of the desert ferns, they use asexual a lot. And we actually have that in the book. We'll say, we know that this one uses asexual ways of reproducing. So they definitely can do that, but I don't know about Ophioglossum per se. That I don't know there's ever been studies on that. So you need to dig it up and see what's happening there. Yeah, Nathan. No. So that is what has been called, that has always been imbricans. It's all been misidentified. I still kept it in the thing because there's one specimen from Arizona that was actually annotated by an expert in ferns, and so I kept it on there, but I'm not overly convinced that we have it. It's common north of us, not impossible that it could be here. It's the common one you see as you go up into the kind of Northern California and up into Oregon. It's a really common fern, but it kind of peters out right before it gets to our county. And so you could find it, you're just gonna have to know what the characters are to separate it out. Yeah. Go ahead. Are we okay with time? And okay. Don't. Seek is amazing if you're like a small child and you want to go out in the field and just like learn a few plants, that kind of thing, but it gives us nothing. So you don't upload the data, and it was actually kind of designed for kids. And whereas INAT will do that today as well, it'll give you an ID, but the advantage of that, it gives us a point, an observation that anybody can see, we can verify it or not and change the ID, that kind of thing. So please don't use that unless, if you want to use it on horticultural things, go out in the garden here and do that, I don't care. But if you're out in the field and you want to go for a hike and contribute to science, use iNaturalist. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The big canyons that are completely taken over by weeds, where you can go in and search weeds, you expect that ferns will come in?
No, not necessarily. It depends on which urban canyon you're talking about. I always say if there's fragment of natural vegetation, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of an anti-restoration person because we bring in too much crap and it's not supposed to be in that area. But if there's a nice fragment there and you did weeding around it, yes, they would invade without any problem. Things, if there's some there. Some of our canyons are gone. We understand that. That has to be done by restoration planting types of things. You could, absolutely. But I don't know if many people do that. I don't think I see much ferns on restoration stuff. No, that doesn't happen very often. I mean, think about it. It's part of our natural area as well. So, yeah, Nathan.
Do you have stuff with the pentagramma, whether it's glandular vista or triangularis, that have the dusty farina on the backside?
That's a good question. I actually address it in the book, and I actually talked to some pentagramma experts on that. So what's happening is up in our higher country near Cuyamaca, There is, and over a little bit. We thought we kept finding maybe Maxonii. I'm not convinced that we actually have Maxonii. Everything I've seen of that looks like a triangularis, but there is some farina rather than glands on the upper surface. Maxonia has glands. And we do have it in the Mojave Desert, and we do have it in Baja California, and it's native all over in Arizona. But it is not, I'm not convinced that we have Maxonii. We do have something. And I talked to them about it. I'm like, this looks most like Pentagramma triangularis, and somebody needs to do some work on that. It might be another taxon.
Have you taken a look at the pentagram that I collected on cotton that looked like glandular viscera, but was covered in Fernan-Adaxial?
And I don't think so. Did you have a specimen?
Yeah.
I have to have a specimen for that because INAT use, okay, I'll take a look at it. But that wouldn't be a place I would expect it anyway. Of the Maxonia, I would think desert transition would
Yeah, it
definitely be.
looks like color is here.
Oh, I've seen the one you're talking about. Yeah.
right, that's the-
Okay.
maybe it's just-
It could be, but that's, I mean, there's, remember, we're in the center of diversity of Pentagramma. Who knows what is, they hybridize. Many of these ferns hybridize out there, and who knows what we might actually find out there. So document, document, document. That's, thank you for bringing a specimen. Okay.
Okay, John, I want to thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Very informative. Thank you. And before you walk away, I need your help.
Okay. Oh, we're trying.
So let me mix up the tickets.